Well, in this video, what we're going to do is going to show you how I go about preparing a three-dimensional template for cutting multiples of one particular pattern or another. I'll show you what the finished template kind of looks like. It's this is the template here, and the two most useful parts. There are some outer pieces that you don't really have any need of. This will come in really handy if you're going to be cutting out multiples of the same pattern. If you're only going to be cutting one, you can still use the approach that I'm going to demonstrate here in this video in order to cut the side view and the back view, side view and back view of a pattern like this. Or if it's a songbird, it might be a top view as opposed to a back view. The top view of this owl is pretty oblique when you're looking down. There's not really that much happening to make this accurate. But the back view, which is a flattened out view of this portion, like if you extend, you're looking at the bird straight from this angle, you get this view. If you're looking from straight from above, you'll get this view. And it's really important to try to maintain your perspective. This pattern was drawn in such a way that if they're lined up with this line being parallel, the center line for the head and the other line for the the center line for the head and the center line for the body, as long as those are parallel, these two views should line up. So the back of the tail will line up properly and the top of the head should line up. If you get one of them twisted and out of whack, if you look at these two views here, they line up well. But if you were to twist this one like that, it's going to appear shorter. See, it lines up at the top, doesn't quite reach at the bottom. And that's because it needs to be perfectly lined up. So these two lines are parallel, and then this length and this length will match up. Or they'll be very close. They might not be within a millimeter or anything, but they'll be pretty close. So what I want to do is I want to cut a blank where both of these views are cut on the same blank. Here's how I go about doing it. First off, I start with a piece of wood. In this case, I'm just going to use basswood. But I've already done this other template I made out of Tupelo. Whatever kind of wood you want to use. Sometimes I just use basswood for the template because it's a little tougher than Tupelo, and I can always cut a bunch of Tupelo blanks from this template when I'm done. What I want to do, my goal here is to actually have the side view attached here, and you need to make sure that you've got enough wood that this center line for the bill can be set up parallel to the edge of the wood. In other words, if this wood was narrower, I couldn't put this on here like that and use a narrower piece of wood because this is not parallel to the edge. So I need a piece of wood that's big enough that I can run this line parallel to the outer edge, and I want at least 1/4 of an inch of wood all the way around. If I get less than that, my template could be kind of weak and flimsy. So I want to have a little bit extra when I'm doing this. The other thing that's quite important is to make sure that your wood is square. So I trim it up on the bandsaw. I take one side, make sure that I got a flat side, and then trim up the edges on the bandsaw. If I have to, trim up the back. I want the width of this, like I can set it on my pattern here, I want the width to be a good 1/4 of an inch. The wood should be a good 1/4 of an inch wider than the width of the pattern as well. I need a little extra wood to make this template work. So once I've got a piece of wood dressed like that, and I've got it set up, the next thing for me to do is to glue the pattern on here. And what I generally do when I'm doing these is I'll take my paper pattern here, and I don't go and cut it out exact. Like I just cut close to the edge of it. I'm not really concerned about getting this perfectly cut. Just do this quickly here to show you how I go about so I'm leaving a little bit outside the bird, or outside of my pattern drawing. Doesn't have to be much. I mean, if you really wanted to, you cut it exact, but I found that's kind of a waste of time. So I'll cut out my side template, and I'll cut out the back template. And if you're using a properly drawn pattern, this won't be a problem. Some patterns that you get out of books and some patterns you might find, the side view or the back view and the side view don't necessarily match each other very well. In this case, as long as these lines are parallel to each other, these two views should match. If you tilt one of them so that the lines aren't parallel anymore, you're not going to get a good lineup. So that's really important. If you're using a pattern other than one of my patterns, sometimes what you have to do is you have to draw a vertical line through the side view. Quite often the center line is shown on the back view, but you'll have to draw a plumb line on your side view so that you can make sure those lines are matching up. So now that I've got this, I just preliminarily make sure that this is going to fit onto the wood with that line parallel to the corner of the wood. And if that's all working good, then what I usually do is I just take a glue stick. I found these ones tend to work pretty good. These yellow sticks. Take the glue stick here and get a good layer of this glue over the entire pattern, especially along the edges, but I try to make sure I get coverage over the whole thing. And then I will line this up, making sure that this line is parallel to the edge. This line here is parallel to the outer edge. And then I just put it on. It's helpful if the wood is kind of a bit smoother sanded, although like this edge here is just a rough sawn edge right off the bandsaw. It's not that rough, but I stick onto bandsaw cuts, and sometimes I'll even take a piece of wood that's like a mill cut, like the rougher stuff right out of the sawmill. And if you use enough glue, you can stick that on there. It works good too. Sometimes your wood is just thick enough and you don't have the luxury of trimming off a little bit on the wood. If that's the case, then stick the pattern onto the rough wood. Use enough glue, it'll go. And then what I need to do is I need to make sure that I'm matching this view. Like I don't want to go, for example, I don't want to go like this because the front of the bird is not on the front here. So you want to make sure that you match these up properly. And something else that I do sometimes is I'll take my pencil just to make sure that I've got everything lined up. I'll take my pencil and I'll mark in where the top of the head is here. And I'll make sure that I use that as a reference line for putting on this back view here. I want it roughly centered. I want the top of the head to line up with my pencil line. And I want to make sure that I have wood on either side I need the wood to be wider than the bird is. In this case, because I've got some kind of questionable wood in the back here, I'm going to move this bird a little closer to the front of this board. And this, I've still got a good 1/4 of an inch on this corner here from this corner. So that's where I'm going to mount it. I'm going to cut out, hopefully trim off a little bit of this stuff on the back. We'll see where it goes. A lot of times when I'm doing these 3D templates, I'm not worried too much about the bird blank that I get out of the inside. If I'm just doing it as a template, because I'm going to be cutting a dozen of these for a carving class. So the template is really, really important to me. The bird on the inside, not so much, or not as much. So now I know that's going to line up and work properly. So I'll take my glue stick and make sure that I get a nice layer of glue over the entire bird, especially the outer parts here. Then I just very carefully want to line up my top of the head so that these are lined up properly. And that's about where I want that to be. I can look here and just make sure that this line is running straight down. So straight along the edge. And then I'll just put that on here and squish it down. So that's my block prepared. I'm ready to start cutting. Now, if you were just cutting if you're just cutting a single bird out, you would still do exactly what I've done here. You would want to put on this, and if you want to do the side view and the back view. If you're only cutting a blank that's just strictly side view, like this blank is, which is the way we sell our blanks typically, are just side view profile cut. But if this is all you're going to do, you can just find a piece of wood that's thick enough and lay your pattern on there, trace around it, or glue your pattern on. And you could even, if you're using a narrower piece of wood, you could even get by with that. If you're just doing the side view, the profile cut. But if you want the side and the back view together, you got to do something like this. So I get them on the same block of wood. This is all prepared. Next thing I'm going to be doing is we'll go into the cutting room and get to work on the bandsaw. Okay. So here we are with the block. We're in the bandsaw room, ready to do some cutting. So make a little noise here. We turn on our dust collector. I've got the height set up in here. First thing I'm going to do is to cut out most of the side view here. What I tend to do when I'm cutting something like this out is I'll start in here. One of the bridges up on one end and one of the bridges on the other end. That way, when I'm cutting the other bridges, it's not going to rock all over the place on you. If I leave both the bridges in the middle, it becomes very straight and stable and has a tendency to rock. Peter plotter again. We'll avoid that. Out of that cut. So now I've cut through, you can see where I've cut through, it's still one piece of wood. Now what I need to do is I need to adjust the height of my guard a little bit so I'm clear. And then what I'll do with this side, I'll go through and I'll cut the entire thing out. Most of the time it doesn't matter whether I do the back view first or the side view first. On some carvings, like certain carvings, with experience you might find, well, maybe it's better to do the back view first, and leave the little bridges on the back view, cut out the entire side view. This back view here, this is actually the most important part of the template, because I will be using this piece, the top cutoff piece, I'll be using that as a three-dimensional template to cut out a larger number of birds. The other thing that I'm kind of in the habit of doing, I'll go right out of this now, and I'll keep that piece, I'll save it. The other thing I'm in the habit of doing is I'm in the habit of cutting from the top down this way and from the top down this way. My bandsaw is really nicely squared up, but if your saw isn't perfectly squared up, when you cut this rather than go the other way. If your saw's a little out of square, you'll end up with a really off shape on your carving. So I always recommend you do the cuts all from one direction. Start at the top for those cuts and start at the bottom for those cuts. It's also, really important to, as much as you possibly can, to make sure that your blade is square to your table on the bandsaw. I'm hoping to do a whole video on setting up and using the bandsaw for carving. But now, I would say that I make sure that the saw is properly set up. I make sure that this saw, I check it regularly to make sure that this saw is properly set up. Now I'm going to complete this cut. I'm going to cut out finish the cut there. So now I've completed the, you can see what I've done here. A little bridge here, a little bridge there. To finish those bridges now, I take the bottom piece, lay this back in place like that, and then just follow my original cut. I don't want to cut the actual bird. If I'm going to cut away a little extra wood, I'll cut the template if I have to. So I come in here and open this up a little bit. So that's clear. And then this other one, I've got a bridge up here. So now what I've got is I've got these pieces here that I'll put everything back together just for a moment so you can kind of get an idea where we started. So we got these pieces. This one here, what I'll do is I'll put this back on the saw and I'll cut through this little bridge here and this little bridge here, just so that I've got this other side template. But this was my block of wood when I started, and after cutting, I've taken off that front view, I've got a back view, and then these little corners aren't going to be of really any use to me. I can discard those. And the most useful part of this whole exercise is this piece, the bottom, that the bird would nest in like this, and I'll demonstrate that shortly. And then the other piece here, this top piece, like that. Those two pieces are the ones that I'm going to keep using over and over and over again when I go to cut out more and more blanks. Using this technique, if you're carving many birds, or if you're cutting many birds, using this technique will save you time and it'll save you wood as well, because you remember when I demonstrated this, I needed a piece of wood that was wide enough this way that this vertical line could be parallel to the outer edge. Now, and I need a square block to cut out the wood. So now when I'm using this template, I will be able to take and interlock a bunch of birds on wood that's just thick enough, cut out the side profiles, and then I can use my template to finish off the back. All right, so we cut out the other blank here, and in the process created a three-dimensional template. I'm going to show the advantage of having that three-dimensional template, how you can save wood and you can save time. What I've done, first thing that I did was I took, previously I took a side view here, and I took my bandsaw, set up the rip fence, and I just cut a little slice off the front of it and ended up with a little flat template like this. Now I've selected a piece of Tupelo here that is thick enough for the width of the carving. Like this wood's wide enough or thick enough that I can set that on there, and I know I'll be able to get wide enough wood for the bird. So I'll take this piece, and remember before we needed a square piece of wood in order to make everything work. This time I don't need to worry about the wood being square. I just need to worry about it being thick enough and big enough that I can put my template on here I do want the grain of the wood running parallel more or less to the tail and the wings. That's fairly typical. But I'll put this on here and just take a pencil now. Remember before we were cutting out and gluing the pattern. Some people will put a piece of carbon paper on the bottom side of the pattern and trace around it. This is way quicker. And now what I can do is I can, depending on, sometimes you can play around a little bit and you know, juggle things around to get as many of these things down on your piece of wood as possible. So when I'm doing a whole bunch of these for a class, lay that in there and trace around like that. See, I can lock this one down in here. Utilize, now I don't have enough wood here to do another owl, but you know, if I go like this, sometimes put this in here and just lightly go around here and just kind of get a bit of a trace there. See, I've almost got enough to get another owl, but I don't think I can get more than 3 out of this particular piece of wood. But if I keep this one good and tight up in here, you'll notice I've got a pretty nice little bit of wood left that I can maybe cut some songbirds out of or something, so cut them out later. So now I'll trace around here. I want to leave a, you know, not quite 1/4 of an inch, but over 1/8 of an inch between these things when I'm, you know, I don't want the lines touching, because you got to account for the thickness of the bandsaw blade when you're cutting. So I've set up these 3 owls out of this piece of wood. There's no way if I was working with the square blocks of wood that I would be able to get 3 owls out of the same board footage as I've got here. So now that I've got these things set up, I'm going to be ready to cut them out on the bandsaw. Okay, so we're ready to start cutting. What I generally do is I'll start off by just, instead of trying to get the lines perfectly exact, I'll just cut out the block here. Cut out that little block. And if the wood doesn't sit nice and flat on the table, like it rocks around a little bit, I've got a belt sander in here. I can touch the bottom of this to a belt sander, and that'll help stabilize it. But this piece is nice and solid. It's not rocking around. So what I want to do here now, I'll move this other piece off to the side. What I want to do here now is I want to cut pretty close to my lines, because this blank, when I'm finished cutting it, needs to fit into my 3-dimensional template. So I want to make sure that I'm following my pencil line pretty closely. And this is where that 3/16" blade comes in. It's so nice because you can do tight little corners with it. You can do really nice tight curves, little grooves and dents and stuff like that. Here we got a little bearing that's making a little noise on our guides on this saw. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to do all these cuts. In this case, I'm going to start at the tail. I could have started at the head and done all my cuts from the head down on both sides. I just decided, for no particular reason, just to do it from the tail this time. Again, if you're not quite certain about how square your saw is, you probably want to do all your cuts from the same direction, like all your cuts from the head down. Like whatever you did on the template, you'll do that same cut on your finished one here. obviously keep your fingers away from that blade all the time. There's my, let's get that blade stopped. There we go. There's my blank that I've cut out. So very straightforward, just a side profile cut. And then we're going to show you how I go about preparing this using the three-dimensional template. And I can cut out 20, 30, 50 of these if I wanted to. I'm just going to do the one for the video, but this is where it's nice if you're doing a whole bunch of them. You'll end up with a bunch of little cutouts like this, and I'll show you in a minute what we're going to do next with them. So now that we've cut out this blank, just with the profile cut, the side view only, I'm going to just share with you what I do next in preparing this for a class. Now, I could just put this right onto my three-dimensional template, trace my lines on there and cut it out on the bandsaw. But there's one thing that I like to do first, and that is to draw the center line in. It's really quite easy to draw the center line in on a blank like this when you've got something that's parallel on the sides like that. It's quite easy to draw your center line in. If you're trying to draw the center line in on a blank like this, it's certainly doable. At any point, you can just take, you can take this and measure, okay, that's 75 millimeters. So you mark in a dot for the center and measure here, dot for the center, measure here, dot for the center. It's very, very doable. You can mark in your center line, but it's a lot easier if you do it at this stage. And the way that works is you take your overall, this one's about 80 millimeters wide. So to get my center line on there, I would just, if you use inches, it's 3 1/4, so it'd be half of that. But you put a little mark on where the center line is, and you can keep going around and just putting that mark on there, and then going all the way around the whole bird. So I mark that little line in, and I can mark them all the way around, and then use a flexible ruler here to draw all those things in. That's one way of doing it. The way I do it for my classes is one of my favorite little tools here. Again, this is the pattern for this is available in Prairie Canada Carvers pattern book, which we sell. And the members of the Prairie Canada Carvers Association, one of their members put this little jig in there that you can, little hardware you can adjust and set things up. It's a nifty little device. What you do is you can adjust everything here, get a pencil in there, and when you get the pencil lined up with your center line here, you can see I've got it lined up there, right like that. It's lined up. So now all I do is I just take my pencil with this little device, and there's various versions of these things available. You might be able to find something else online as a pattern, but it's really worthwhile especially if you're teaching classes or you're cutting out multiple blanks. Totally worth your while to invest a bit of time into building a little device like this. Even if nothing else, you get a little block of wood as a makeshift thing. Get a little square block of wood. I don't have one in front of me here, but get a square block of wood and get the pencil lined up like this here. Then tape the pencil onto the wood, or even just hold it in place and use it that way. Like, there's a number of things that you can do that will help you draw a center line in fairly quickly. So when I'm doing a dozen birds like this, it saves me time in the class too, because the students now don't have to draw this center line in. It's a mechanical thing. Almost anybody can do it. Drawing in that center line is not really a big deal. So now that I've got the center line drawn in, I'm not going to worry about a whole lot else. What I want to do now is I want to draw on my top view or my back view. And so this back view that I've got here, this is a template. This is the top of the template from when I cut out this block a minute ago on the bandsaw. So now what I want to do is I want to take this block and I want to go from this to this, from this to this. And the way I do that, two things that I need my template, which I can set on here, and it'll line up with, if you've done things properly. Oh, the other thing that I do when I'm setting up a template like this is I will put a little mark on there and then draw. I want to make sure my center line is drawn on the template itself. On this one, I can just probably do that without the ruler. Just draw a straight little line there. This just helps me line up my center line on my block. So when I line this up, set it on here, I line up the center line on the top, center line on the bottom. So I see I'm lined up there. I'm lined up there. Now it's just a simple matter of taking my pencil and setting my pencil so that it's coming straight down the side here. I don't want to come in at an angle like this. I want to come straight down. And I follow my template. I've got that drawn in. Now, if I happen to kind of miss something, I can, sketch in, or I can put my template back on again and quite easily come back and mark in what I've missed. So this is what I'm going to cut out on the top view. Now, the way I get that done, this is also something in theory, very, very important. When this is sitting like this with that line that's plumb, remember we talked about earlier, this line that's plumb, so it's sitting up this way. So if this is sitting here and this line is plumb, that's the angle that the bird is meant to be perched at. We have other lines that are at right angles to that line, perfect 90-degree right angles. And those line up with the lines on the bird here. And I've drawn these right angle lines in. That's on another video. I show you how I go about doing that. And that's what you do if you want to draw this back view in manually. That's what I did on a previous thing. I drew this back view in manually. You see, they're very, very similar. But this is a lot quicker and easier, especially if you're doing more than one. And it's really important if you were to just take a line like I did on this other blank here. I'm just going to put a little mark here so that I can mark in where that horizontal line is. So if I had a line going here as a reference, you see when the bird's sitting, that line is horizontal. When I'm cutting this bird out on the bandsaw, this line needs to be plumb. Like it needs to be like this. It has to be at right angles to the base of the saw. So that's the angle that I would have to hold this blank at when I'm cutting it out on the bandsaw. You see, it's really wobbly. It would be a dangerous and a stupid cut to do if you tried doing it that way just on your own. And you can't cut like this because now you're not going to get the right view looking at here. It's just not going to line up. Nothing's going to line up properly. Remember, we had to have this parallel to that in order for everything to line up properly. So that's where my template comes in, where I had the bottom view that I cut out here, the bottom of that template. I can set that down here and I can put the bird on there on that bottom template like that. And lo and behold, the line is very, very close to being, it's not perfect, but it's very, very close to being plumb that way. And it's going to be exactly what I got on this bird. This is what I'm going to end up with when I cut out this other view. And this little template, sometimes it gets damaged underneath here. It gets sacrificed a little bit of it on the bandsaw. But when I go onto the bandsaw, I just move it off to one side a little bit so that I move it over this side a little bit. So I'm cutting here. I'm not chewing up the template. And then when I've got this side cut out, I'll slide it over the other way and cut out the other side. And when I'm done, I will end up basically with this. And I'll show you how that works on the bandsaw right away. Right, so we've drawn the back view onto this using our three-dimensional template here. And we're in the bandsaw room now. I've got this set up on the lower template. I've marked this as my cutting template. Sometimes on some patterns, it's hard to tell which one's the cut and which one's the template. On this one's really easy, but on some patterns it can be tricky. So I always mark one, cut, and I say do not cut here and things like that. So I'm going to cut this out. And in order to do that, first thing I'll do is just get the fence set or the guard set so that I can get the whole carving underneath the guard here. You want to obviously watch your fingers when you're doing this. So I'll turn on the going here. So what I'm doing now is I'm following my pencil line. One thing you've got to be very careful of when you're doing a cut like this is keep your fingers well away from the blade, because you can have a tendency, I've heard of people putting their hand underneath the cutter card without realizing the blade comes out underneath there. So just always keep your fingers well away from that blade. And be aware that the blade is not just in the top of the carving, it's down the bottom too. So now and the first, I know some people find the first few times you do this kind of weird because you're not cutting a flat surface on top. It's like the line keeps moving on you. Once you've done it a few times, you get a lot more comfortable with it. Just make sure that the blank is securely held down on the template. And put the first thing off the desk. So now what I do is I'm going to move this template over a little bit. Here, I'm going to move it over so that when I'm cutting down here, I'm not cutting out, chewing off the bottom of my template here. I'm going to just come back in here. Probably going a little slower than I would if just a little bit, than if I was cutting this out just by myself in the room here. Is just barely wide enough, but it is wide enough. And I'm keeping pressure down on the head on this guy, so that I keep the pressure in the same place as I'm cutting it, keep down on the head side. Turn off the saw, turn off the dust collector. Once the blade is stopped, we'll get rid of this debris on the right here, even the sawdust and everything. So now what I've got is I've got the back view cut perfectly and the side view cut perfectly. So this blank is ready to start carving. So just to sum up, in this video, what we've done is we've talked about the advantages of using a three-dimensional template, especially if you're cutting more than one bird. And if you're doing multiple birds, you'll save time and you'll save wood in doing this. You also save a lot of time in the carving, because this side view that you cut on the bandsaw is going to be consistently accurate, probably more so than if you carve this by hand. Now, I'm going to be doing there's a separate video on going from this to this and doing that with a carving tool, like whether you're using a knife or a gouge or a Fordham tool or something like that. I'm going to do this with I do this in a Fordham tool in the other video, but I will be demonstrating that on a separate video that you'll be able to find on our YouTube channel at Maple and Bass. I hope you enjoyed the video, and please subscribe and follow us. We'd appreciate hearing from you. Thanks for watching.